And welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today, we're talking about the key takeaways from tonight's preseason loss against the Cincinnati Bengals. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jayden Daniels is going to be hitting Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Zach Ertz, and many others for multiple touchdowns this upcoming season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we're talking about the key takeaways from tonight's loss against the Cincinnati Bengals. All right, so look, I think that the overall theme from this is that the Washington Commanders were a lot better tonight than what they were against the New England Patriots in week 1 of preseason play. And there are a lot of things that still need to be cleaned up, but I think that there are more positives and more things to really build off of that the Commanders can take with them into the season. And so let's start with the first key takeaway with the offense. And so just focusing on that first. And I think that we saw this team established an identity. I love the fact that this team came out and they ran the football. And I think that that's going to help this team throughout the season for two reasons. I think the first thing that you're doing is that by establishing the run, you're going to be able to slow down opposing teams' pass rushes. And so I think that that is going to help Jayden Daniels. And ultimately, it's going to help this offense because you're going to loosen up defenses and you're really going to have them playing a guessing game. And so I love the fact that the Commanders came out and they ran the football the way that they did. And number two, I think by establishing the identity of running the football like this team did tonight, you're really setting yourself up to just dominate the time of possession. And I think that any time that you can dominate the time of possession in a football game, then you're going to put yourself in a good situation to win that game, especially when it comes down to later in the year when you're making playoff pushes and things like that. Because what you want to do is you want to keep elite offenses off the field. So that's what you are definitely going to face when you start to get into the playoffs and things like that. I know we're nowhere near that, but just anticipating that you get back to that point, you're going to need to keep those offenses on the side of the field. And so I think that by establishing the identity like we saw tonight, terrific start. I just loved how they ran the football right down the Bengals' throat. And when you look at just how this thing started, I love that we saw Deebo Samuel come off the end around. And so I think that that shows you just not only are they going to run the football with the running backs, but they are going to use Deebo Samuel. And it just really makes you think about just what type of versatility we are going to see from this offense, because you can imagine when they get Terry McLaurin back and he's clicking with Jayden Daniels, you have Deebo Samuel. We're hoping that somebody is going to step up outside of those guys. This is going to be a very dangerous offense to stop. And so I also love how this drive finished, because Jayden Daniels once again shows us exactly why we have a franchise quarterback here with the Commanders, because in that play, it looks like that the Bengals start to come up the middle with some pressure. It looks like that he came off a couple of his reads, stepped up and just sidestepped the rush and got to the end zone. And you just loved how he was able to finish through contact. And so that was great to see with Jayden Daniels. And then, the next thing just out of this with the offense, with the running backs, I think that coming into this, we knew it was going to be interesting because we talked about this in the earlier video with Brian Robinson Jr. and just it being a mutual agreement between the team and him that he wasn't going to play tonight. And so we'll see how that situation shakes out. But you knew that others were going to have opportunities. And I think that Chris Rodriguez Jr. and then Jacory Croskey-Merritt definitely stepped up in the space that they got tonight, especially with Chris Rodriguez Jr. I've got to give him a ton of credit because his run, he showed, just vision. He showed the power. He showed speed. I loved how he finished runs all night tonight. I just love that about Chris Rodriguez Jr. And you can just tell he's just more focused than he's ever been with this team. And so I'm glad to see he got an opportunity tonight. And so you can just tell just from the stats for him that it was a good one because he had 6 rushes, 62 yards, 10.3 was his average, and 40 was his longest. And so, again, man, he had a very good one, really set this team up to get the first touchdown. And then with Jacory Croskey-Merritt, he scored the second touchdown on the night. And I think that what you saw with him, just like Chris Rodriguez Jr., you saw the speed, you saw the burst, you saw the power, like you saw everything that you would want to see, from your starting running backs out there. And so I think that both of those players did a terrific job, which leads me to the next point offensively out there. The offensive line, I thought, did a terrific job because there were several plays, especially looking at those run plays. Josh Conley Jr. is a gamer, man, because when you go back and you look at the individual clips there, he definitely makes sure that he gets to his assignment. I thought that he did a terrific job with his seal, especially when you go back and you look at the play where Jacory Croskey-Merritt here scores. Excellent block from Josh Conley Jr. I thought he did a terrific job when the rush was coming and everything else. I think that he's going to be just fine. And I really do think that he is trending towards having just a major role here in year one. And so, I know, they're going to look at it as probably a rotational thing, but I think that with the way Josh Conley Jr. has started off right now, if he can continue with this momentum, maybe he's going to be the guy right there on that right side. And so Josh Conley Jr. awfully impressive. And I think that this offensive line was awfully impressive too. And so got to give them a ton of credit. Next thing, as far as like a key takeaway out of this defensively, I was impressed with it. And so I know that we got beat tonight. I get it. But, man, when the first unit was out there, I thought that they were swarming. I thought that they did a terrific job as far as getting to the ball carrier. In fact, that when you look at the stats tonight, much, much better against the run. Only 87 yards for the Bengals. They only averaged 3 yards a carry, which was much better than what we saw against the Patriots. They almost averaged 5 yards a carry there, and they actually outrushed us. And so tonight, the defense definitely stopped that. I thought that they did a terrific job as far as getting to Joe Burrow. That was encouraging to see. They got a great sack near him. You also saw that Dietrich Wise Jr. had a very good sack. Unfortunately, it turned into a penalty because it was a horse collar, but still, I love the energy and effort that we saw from this defense. And just going back to the first drive in which the Bengals scored on, really, I think that there might have been a chance that the Washington Commanders could have got the stop because had Frankie Louvu not jumped off sides there, I'm not sure that the Bengals were necessarily going to snap that football because it was down to about 7 or 6 on the play clock there. So could have been initially a stop early on. And so, I just loved what we saw from the Commanders defensively there. Obviously, there's some things that they need to clean up, which we're going to talk about that in a moment. But I think a much better start for them defensively. And so the next thing that I wanted to talk about here is just going into some more of just the individual stuff here. And so I think that one of the guys that showed out tonight to me, I liked what I saw from Kaz Allen. And so I think that Kaz Allen had a very good return tonight. And so definitely you could see just how shifty he is in the open field. I loved what I saw from Jeremy Reaves. There was one play where he saved a first down, which ultimately the Bengals came back and they converted on a fourth down. But still, Jeremy Reaves was all over the place out there. I thought he played with a ton of energy out there. And you see why they are really just excited for him and why you just need to find a position for him. And one of the things that was mentioned throughout the broadcast was just the importance of what the safeties are going to be for the defense here, because that's just how Dan Quinn, Joe Wood Jr. like to run the defense. And so he has a chance to be impactful because I do think that, they're looking for players that they can sub in situations and take care of business. And so I think that Jeremy Reaves did a great job today in that aspect. Next thing, when you're taking a look at Kane Madrano. And so Kane Madrano, I think that he did a terrific job because it was a potential play fake the play before the Bengals scored. And you could tell he initially came up, he got back into coverage. And so that was a good thing to see. And so he didn't get fooled there. That led to an incomplete pass. They eventually go on and they score a touchdown there. Unfortunately, Quan Martin couldn't keep him out of the end zone, but still just looking at Kane Madrano, I thought that he did a terrific job as far as playing fast out there, trusting what he saw, and just not getting roped into a play fake like that. And so I thought that was a good takeaway from him tonight. Next thing too, just kind of looking at some other, things out of this that just really, it didn't go our way. And starting with the quarterback play after Jayden Daniels. And so I think between Sam Hartman and Josh Johnson, like I think that they struggled tonight. Once again, when you look at the stat sheet, we lose the turnover battle tonight. So, that's something that you never want to do. And so 2 interceptions thrown, and just the first interception, Josh Johnson, double coverage looking for Jalen Lane. So that wasn't necessarily a great one. Then when Sam Hartman threw his interception, which ultimately led to a Bengals score, he pretty much stared down the wide receiver there. So that wasn't a good decision there. And so those are things that definitely you've got to tighten up with the turnovers and things like that. I know that those guys are probably still battling it out, for who's going to be the third quarterback. But, a tough night for them tonight. And then the next thing too, just going back to another thing that the Commanders are going to have to clean up is the penalties yet again. And so it was a lot better than what it was this last week out, but still not anywhere where you want to be there, because it was 7 penalties for 74 yards today. I know that the Bengals had more with the 9, but they had less yards. And so at the end of the day, you can have less penalties, but if you have more yards, I mean, you're still working at a negative here. And so that's something that, just definitely the team is going to have to tighten up and just kind of getting back to the standards and things like that. So, those are a couple key takeaways there where the Washington Commanders have got to get better. But like I said, overall, I think that there were a lot of things that you take out of this, and it was a pretty solid performance. Just going quickly into what was said here, just post game. And so DQ did say that the D line was pretty active tonight. And so he did acknowledge that in his post game. He also talks about just the fact that the run game was a lot better, which we just talked about that here. He did talk about Trey Amos, and the tightness in his hamstring. He said that that was something that he initially felt, I guess, Saturday. He warmed up. He wanted to go, but they went ahead and decided to go ahead and not have him out there. Would have loved to see how he matched up against Jamar Chase today, but it didn't happen for him. And so next thing to talking about just how he addressed the team and let them know about the B-Rob situation. And so didn't really go into too many details like that, and understandably so. But Jayden Daniels said the same thing, that he did acknowledge the team and let them know kind of what the deal was. And so, just that's Dan Quinn, just kind of, running the ship there. And so, taking care of business there and keeping the players all on the same page that way. As far as Jayden Daniels, he was talking about Jalen Lane getting better when he was asked about him, I think, in the interview. And then one of the other things that I think is a key insight from Jayden Daniels and what he was talking about on the sidelines here during the broadcast is he says that, Terry McLaurin coming through that door soon. And so, I'm hoping that that is the case, and we do get a chance to see Terry McLaurin and just see him rev up here for week 1, because like I said, this offense came out and it looked very good. And so you can imagine if this team were able to stay on the field, I think that they would have done some damage tonight. And so the next thing he talks about is just continuing to be ready. And then also, too, he said that he wanted to score the touchdown. And so he said that, it talked about how everybody was holding their breath as he went and he ran the football, but he wanted to score. So you love hearing that from Jayden Daniels, just the competitor that he is. But I think that those are really the key takeaways tonight. So, unfortunately, a loss tonight, but just, again, some great stuff. And so you guys let me know in the comments what your key takeaway was from this game. Was it the fact that the offense just came out and just established the identity like they did here? Is that the key takeaway? Was it the running back play? Because we knew that B-Rob was going to be out. I do feel like that, both running backs definitely stepped up tonight. And I just wonder, is this the pivot that the Washington Commanders might make here? And so, maybe it's not about a trade. Maybe they might just release Brian Robinson Jr. Is that something that could be a scenario here where that happens and then they just go with what they have on the roster? And so maybe could it be these two with, Chris Rodriguez Jr. and Jacory Croskey-Merritt going out there and splitting time. Obviously, Austin Eckler didn't play tonight, but it's going to be interesting there. Next thing, too, let me know what you guys were thinking as far as what we saw from the rookie tonight. I thought that Josh Conley Jr., man, he was solid with his blocks. I thought he was solid in protection. I thought he was solid in the run game, just really showing how versatile he is. And so can't wait to see what he's going to look like. Again, I continue to say it. This guy is a huge gamer. Let me know what you guys are thinking about with the quarterback play behind Jayden Daniels between Sam Hartman and Josh Johnson. I think it was a bit of a struggle tonight for those players. And defensively, again, I think that this team showed exactly what they could do. And I think it's going to ramp up even more because keep in mind, we didn't have Bobby Wagner out there today. We didn't have Von Miller out there. And I'm sure we haven't seen the full package of the defense just yet. But I think what you're going to see is just they're going to be able to throw a lot of bodies at you, a lot of different looks. They're going to have these offenses guessing. And so a good sign defensively today, a lot of stuff to be cleaned up. You guys let me know in the comments. We'll be talking a little bit more about the key takeaways and some of the comments here that came after the game, along with if we get any more updates around B-Rob and this situation. And so as we always say, look, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.